I'm Vanessa Welch with WFTV, and here in Orlando, critics say they use police scanners to be a watchdog, and not being able to listen will allow cops to become the secret police with less accountability.
Good morning, WX4ADX.
Joe Mattern has been listening to police scanners for 30 years. He says they kept him safe when a wanted criminal on the run was taken down by deputies in his backyard. Mattern heard the crook was coming his way and immediately locked his doors.
If I didn't have the scanner, I couldn't equip myself and better understand that harm was coming towards me.
Police scanners are about to go silent. Starting April 1st, Orlando Police will encrypt its new digital radios. Orange County Sheriff's Office will do the same thing by 2012. The media listens to scanners so it can dispatch crews and get important information to viewers. Mattern and groups like Cop Watch also use them to monitor police behavior.
There will no longer be the ability to police the police. I think that they're trying to minimize their exposure to the media regarding potential mistakes that they make.
But is this an attempt to try to hide something?
Oh, absolutely not.
Orange County Public Safety Director Mike McCoy says the goal is to protect officers and the community and to keep crooks from listening.
You don't want the public to know where your cops are all the time, and that's pretty much the genesis for it.
We asked Orlando Police why not only encrypt certain channels.
So that nobody knows what our tactics are as we're coming up to the burglary or as we're responding to the robbery. Because like I said, the bad guys are listening too, and they're using it to their advantage.
Orlando Police could not cite a specific case where police scanners interfered with one of its investigations. After we sat down with them today, they did agree to try to come up with some sort of compromise so the media could listen in and know which crimes they're responding to. In Orlando, Vanessa Welch, Channel 9 Eyewitness News. Now let's send it to Susan Falcon, who has more on this discussion from our newsroom.
Thank you, Vanessa. Now to continue our discussion on radio encryption, we speak with Barbara Cochran from RTNDA. Barbara, are there any federal rules that provide the public, including the media, access to police and fire transmissions?
No, there is no federal regulation that allows the media to listen in on police and fire and other emergency transmissions. And in fact, there's never even been a case that's been brought into the courts to determine that. So a lot of journalists think there is a right to do that, but in fact there isn't.
What are the best arguments for the media and the public to use when protesting digital encryption? Public policy, open government?
What we've advised newsrooms to do when their local police switch to this kind of communication is to talk to the police and to make the case on the basis of good government that it serves the community well for news media to be able to monitor these emergency transmissions and to respond quickly. A second reason is to be able to hold these police departments and other public safety agencies accountable. After all, they are being paid for by the taxpayers. The taxpayers have a right to know how they are doing their job, and by being able to monitor these transmissions, the news media can help keep an eye on how these departments are functioning, and so that kind of watchdog role is important also.
Several media outlets across the country have successfully fought to keep their access to some of the dispatch channels used by police and fire. Why have their efforts been successful?
A number of our members have been able to work with their local public safety authorities when they're making this switch to encrypted transmissions, and they do it through the power of persuasion. And often if they go if there are representatives of all the media in a community that can go and say, look, this isn't just our station, it's everyone, and to make the case on the grounds of good government and good public policy, that this is something that will serve the community well. They do want the public to know that they're doing a good job and that they're reacting quickly, and so they will agree, and what happens is they'll allow the newsrooms to purchase a digital scanner, and then they will give them the code so that they can continue monitoring the transmissions.
Is it possible that with this increased technology, communication between neighboring communities and agencies could be impacted, especially during an emergency situation?
9/11 was a great example of how different agencies couldn't communicate with each other because they were using different frequencies, they didn't have access, and it was considered a real problem and led to a lot of the action that's been taken now, including freeing up more of the spectrum for public safety communications. And certainly, that's something that I think news people support the idea that public safety officials can communicate with each other in time of an emergency. I think what we're asking and what newsrooms are asking is to have the ability simply to monitor those transmissions and to be included, because after all, journalists are first responders too in an emergency.
Will radio encryption make news organizations 100% dependent on press releases?
It certainly could be a big problem, and the reason that it's so important for newsrooms to be able to monitor these transmissions is because of that speed of relaying important emergency information to the public. And there also is the important function of the news media as a watchdog on how well public agencies are operating, are functioning. And if they can't hear these transmissions, they're not going to be able to judge that. And so pretty soon, the information is coming only from a press release, only from public relations activity, and unfortunately, that can mean that the only information that we're getting is information that comes from spin. That's not a healthy situation for any community.
Is the transmission still considered a public record, even though it is encrypted and cannot be heard by the public?
These transmissions are not considered a public record, no, and that's it's something that a lot of journalists think, well, this ought to be made available and made public, and it really isn't necessarily at the time of the broadcast. Now, there have been many attempts over the years, and successful attempts to get these transmissions put on the record. And certainly we're familiar with people getting 911 calls and being able to go in through Freedom of Information request and get that kind of information. With regard to whether or not these transmissions are a public record, your ability to obtain that after the fact depends on what the sunshine laws and what the Freedom of Information policy is in that jurisdiction.
What's the best way to get cooperation from law enforcement agencies?
You need to sit down with them and make the case, and I think it's also helpful if you can do that in conjunction with other news organizations in your market, and include the newspapers, because they also depend on this kind of overhearing scanners as well in order to follow the news. But I think if you make the case that this is something that is in the public interest, so that the public can see how well the law enforcement agencies are performing, and also to be able to transmit emergency information to the community as speedily as possible. Those are very good arguments to make, and we know that it's worked pretty well up to now in communities that have converted to this kind of encrypted transmission.